Good morning, America. Hubert Johnson here with Taxes Made Easy. It's the 4th of July week. So, we're going to talk a lot about freedom, economic freedom, and how does that impact you and your household. A lot of great news out there today. Some good news for the economy, finally. And we're going to be going back and forth and this week really focusing on some of our founding principles, the reasons to celebrate the 4th of July, and where do we stand now as we remember our independence. So stick with us. We've got a lot of great news articles, a lot of good from both sides of the aisle. Where are we going from this? And a lot of countries are deciding the same. Do they go left? Do they go right? They got the French Revolution, not revolution, but French elections deciding the same issues as we are coming up with another election. Welcome back, everybody, and got a lot to cover today, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. First, a couple of IRS notices and articles that shouldn't surprise anybody. Marijuana is still a Schedule I controlled substance. Still illegal federally, even though it's been made legal through many states. So, again, that hasn't changed. Republican or Democrat administrations, it hasn't changed. So, again, I know it's legal and there's plenty of businesses selling marijuana. So you still have to follow the law. And if you have questions, concerns, contact a CPA that specializes in the marijuana industry. And here's a specialized code 280E that applies to it. Next article here is, again, this is nothing new, but I think I get plenty of questions on this, which is why I'm bringing it up and mentioning it. People think that, hey, the IRS has no way to see what's going on with Bitcoin, digital wallets, all kinds of online assets. Well, the law says they do. And it's been this way. So again, you have final regulations being issued requiring broker reporting. So the IRS is demanding that the brokers, people that are selling you these digital assets, report everything. Sales and exchange of digital assets are subject to tax under current law. But that are subject to tax under current law, which is most of it. And again, how do you avoid some of these penalties? But these are for the brokers. These aren't for the people actually purchasing it. So they're trying to get these brokers into compliance. If they find them that they're selling stuff and they're not compliant, then they can be subject to some pretty hefty penalties. So when you get online, and I've had people ask me, hey, if I go on the dark web and I buy digital assets, I'm like, yeah, that's great, but what's the likelihood that they're going to just rip you off? Which happens, and I've had clients that have bought digital assets or invested in different current digital currencies. It turns out to be a scam. So anytime you invest a little bit, and whenever you try to pull that money out, they try to say, oh, you need to pay taxes, or you need to do this or that. It's a scam. Report it to the FBI. Call us if you have any questions. 520-485-7371. But again, it's just be very careful of it. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So again, all of this gets reported just like any other exchange, stock market or gambling. It's all treated the same. That the broker is reported to report all of the sales and exchanges. So every time you make money from it, they have to report it. But ironically, the IRS does not require every time you lose money on it. So every time you buy or you sell at a loss, all they get is the sales. They don't get when you buy it. So again, the base is not figured into this. The actual gains, is not figured into this, so it forces taxpayers to get all that information and actually report and file all this on their return. Otherwise, you're going to get hammered, um, and the IRS will treat it as if you made a lot more money than you ever did, often more money than you ever invested into it. So again, be very aware of this. Again, digital assets, it's not being hid. So this is an interesting article, and this is from USA Today. This is a tough one. And we tell people all the time, I mean, there's not a whole lot that we as tax preparers or tax attorneys can do when we have, actually, let's sort of go back to the story. When people get hurt through tax fraud. And here's the when they have to go report it, if you get scammed, if someone takes over your identity, report it right away. Contact the IRS, put a PIN in place, but it can take nearly 2 years to help the identity theft victims get their refunds and get things straightened out with the IRS. Again, this is, I hate to say it, but IRS customer service getting worse than ever. And this is from the National Taxpayer Advocate, which is part of the IRS. They're their own independent agency, so they operate independently, but they are part of the overall IRS. They're supposed to help improve the IRS. Again, the situation appears to be getting worse, not better, to clearing up ID theft cases and getting refunds to those that are supposed to get it. So while people are waiting, it's just taking longer than ever. So it kind of breaks it down a little bit now. What does it do when I receive 2 returns for one taxpayer? It will reject the taxpayer's return. And then you need to go and file for fraud. And it's saying the IRS needs to take the time to analyze who's really owed, but it doesn't. Normally just freezes the second return, and then the IRS sorts out which one is a legitimate one. The IRS likes for everything to flow, which means they'll just take the first return, process it, and then when the second one, if you have to wait, etc. That's why a lot of people that are abusing the system, claiming children that they shouldn't, etc., are they try to file as soon as they can to get in there and be the first one to file. But again, it hurts taxpayers, and so that they have a backlog of almost 500,000 cases. So once you get a PIN in place, again, that's going to help you moving forward. The best thing you can do, if you're concerned about it, go ahead and put a PIN in place online early. So when you put that on your case, nobody can file a tax return under your social unless they have that PIN number. So again, it hurts some of the poorest, the worst, and just kind of goes on from there. But that's kind of a striking article that it's taking the IRS that long to help people process and get their returns. That really hurts, especially with identity theft being as rampant as it is today. So be aware that it is going to take quite some time to get it resolved. So general economic news, Nike is stock is sinking. Again, larger sales decline than expected. And I think Nike's been suffering for a while, but again, if the stock fell 20%, and it's just that their products aren't selling the way they used to. I mean, people don't have the money to spend on expensive gear. But their products usually tend to be good overall. So just something to watch out for. And then John Deere, another iconic American company, announcing more layoffs in the Midwest and for shifting production to Mexico. This is the opposite of what we want. So around 600 people are being laid off in Illinois, Iowa, throughout the Midwest. And part of the reason is, and I've heard this in other areas of the economy, things have gotten so expensive that people just aren't buying. They're holding on to what they have. They're trying to hoard money, and investments are down mainly because of the uncertainty in the market. Interest rates are up, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a bunch of money into some brand new, very expensive tractors, harvesters. They've got another interesting photo. Yikers, look at that thing. Massive, massive harvester, but those things are expensive. So the largest corporations can afford this stuff, but your average farmer, it's again, a lot of their crops and a lot of their money just go to pay the loans that they get. So a lot of times they're always fighting interest in that they're selling their crop before it even comes up, and they need a good crop to be able to pay off all the debts that they incur every year that they go and farm. And so with interest rates going up, prices going up, it just makes sense that the people supplying those products are hurting even more. So John Deere's looking to cut costs wherever they can, especially for the larger manufacturing. Unfortunately, that hurts. Um, that hurts the average worker, and it hurts American manufacturing in general. More jobs being shipped overseas. So, what are states trying to do to help with this cost? Well, a lot of them, because of inflation, increased costs, they want to make sure the government's funded, so they're raising taxes. Is this the time to raise taxes with inflation going up? Because when you raise taxes, that just takes more money from the average citizen. So again, 7 states have taxes going up today, July 1st. This is published yesterday. And so average price at the pump is $3.45 in June. That includes 18.4 cents a gallon plus state taxes. That's where most of this comes from. So the states and the federal government take way more profit from the sale of gas than the oil companies actually do. So they don't take a percentage of the profit; they take a percentage of the whole, and it's just they take a pretty huge chunk of the whole. Especially when you look at the total price. California leading the way, 69.8 cents as of today per gallon. Add in the 18 cents plus any other fees. I mean, you're looking close to $1 a gallon in taxes. Colorado's increasing 27 cents. Illinois 67, right behind California. Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska, Virginia. And it kind of breaks it down into each state. Just be aware of that as gas taxes go up. People talk a lot about, and we're going to hit some articles later, how we don't want to hurt the poor. And the problem is the gas taxes, sales taxes are very aggressive and hurt the poor the worst. But again, a lot of places, they love these taxes. And they love increasing these taxes, even though it does hurt the poor the worst. So we're going to take a quick break and be back shortly. Welcome back, everybody. I actually have some good news here. CNBC came out, and this has been reported widely. Came out on Friday, so not a lot of people saw it. It kind of got drowned out by the presidential um, debate, and that kind of hit the news all over. But this is good news. Inflation is still going up, but less than expected. Still not at the 2% that they want. But the fact that inflation is going down or not increasing. It's still increasing, but it's not increasing as fast as it was a year ago, according to the PCE and the PCI. So again, or the CPI. Do these numbers account for inflation overall? No, no. So this is not. People look at what's in the grocery stores and then look at actual costs when they go to shop, and this is not what they see. And so people still scratch their head and say, how is inflation low? But it's based on a year ago when inflation jumped up like crazy. So we're still at those high rates, and then it's slowly creeping. It's creeping up from there. But as long as it slows down, the Fed will be happy about it. So again, this is good news overall. It shows the Fed that interest rate is slowing down. So nobody really wants prices to go back down to where they were. That's just not how things normally happen. I mean, is it possible? Yes, but you would need some pretty good economic news to lower prices. And just typically that's not what happens. Usually once you eat it on inflation, it's usually the damages are usually there for good, which is why overspending and blowing up our national budget is really bad news long term for the country. So again, this shows the rate. So 2021, 20 really hitting into 22. You had this really high inflation that persisted through most of the 22. 23, we've still had high inflation per these numbers, and it's just kind of hovered around 2-3%, high enough that the Fed hasn't lowered interest rates. But if it hovers around this or it gets closer to 2%, then it's very possible that they'll consider lowering rates once again, which should really help across the country. But what we don't want to do is get into another situation where we just it's possible that if we lower rates, people start spending, and then we don't want more credit. We want actual growth in the economy, more production, more people be involved in gainful, productive activities. So that's a concern here. Is too often they goose the numbers on with inflation, they spend more money, put more money out there, but in the long term, if you're not doing it and showing actual increase in production, then you're just hurting the economy. So again, they look at the PCI and then the CPI. Overall, this is good news, but let's see what happens as we move forward. And I touched on this before. This is from Epic Times again. How much have groceries gone up? And the problem is people aren't seeing relief at grocery stores because as inflation, the rate of inflation decreases. Nothing's getting cheaper. It's not just shooting up as fast as it used to. So again, it's when they say inflation's down, things aren't cheaper in the grocery stores. They're just getting more expensive at a slower rate. And it doesn't, the way they look at it, it just really, it doesn't jive with what most people are feeling and experiencing when they go to the grocery store. So, Jake Tapper and one of the moderators claimed that grocery prices have only gone up 20% since President Biden was elected. So when you look at actual numbers, and I'm going to focus on some of these charts, when you look at one article from the government Bureau of Labor Statistics, the precise number is 20.8%. So you can claim that based on one the government's own numbers. But this doesn't make sense with what people have actually gone into. So when you look at a basket of goods, and so this is hard to see. Let me see if I can make that a little bigger. So frozen, grocery, alcohol, cheese, produce, meat. They take the average price from October of 2019, and yeah, you had the things stayed low, and this is coming out of the pandemic. This is where things rose throughout this whole period. And when you're looking at month by month numbers, or it was high in 22, still high in 23, but not as high. What they're not doing is, first of all, the government numbers exclude way too much, and they don't look at the overall price increase. So alcohol, which is always expensive, increased the least. But then you have, again, most of the products that people buy, I mean, overall groceries in pink, and you're talking with stuff that is fairly inexpensive, but, meat, alternative meats, definitely jumped and has continued to go well over 100%. So they actually quote CBS News, a grocery price checker. Prices range all over the place, but it's 30-40% higher based on what you buy. Eggs have gone up like crazy, 98% increase. Frozen orange juice up 71%. A loaf of bread, 53% higher. And if you're buying a loaf of bread for $1.97, you are not shopping at a normal grocery store. Cookies are up, yogurt up 49%. Soft drinks have definitely gone up, and they just kind of go through. Ground beef from $3.82 to $5.15. That's typical. A 35% increase. And then chicken breasts have gone up. I mean, pretty much it goes through average price increase. We're talking as high as 98%, but around 30 to 40% for most items. So this is the CPI, again, showing things going slowly, steadily up. But since 2020, even these numbers have shot up dramatically. And they've got a lot of charts in here. Just want to. So if you go and you feel like you're experiencing a lot more pain in the grocery stores, it's because it's over time, prices have gone up very quickly. Now this is an article more from the right, and I'm gonna try to unpack it, but again, it's saying, look, everybody's claiming Trump lied, Biden lied. I mean, it goes both ways. Both sides are going to exaggerate. Both sides are going to say, look, the numbers are horrible for my opponent, great for me, etc. And I'm going to disagree with this article to some extent. Did President Trump run deficits? Yes. He had both houses of Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and they were not serious about cutting the budget. They were not serious about balancing the budget, mainly they're afraid of political backlash, but they lost the House and the Senate anyway. They claimed that he approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while Biden only increased it by $4.3 trillion over a decade. Biden's actions will only add 4.3. I mean, very cherry-picked numbers. Again, if you think Biden is being fiscally responsible, I've got a bridge to sell you. But again, they're taking the bipartisan spending from COVID that both parties went through, which went through the roof at the end of the Trump presidency, and they're claiming that would have completely blown up the budget. But if you look at the red, blue, red being Republican, blue being Democrat, so it has gone up and up and up. Gross public debt in the billions of dollars, and these are forecasted into the future from 24. This is forecasted into the future. Red being from January 2021, last year of Trump's presidency. Last month. and then the forecast as of June 2024, where will things have gone under the Democrats? Here's the kicker. They're going up to unsustainable levels under either party. Both parties are spending way too much money. The Democrats are better at it than the Republicans. So again, it's. I don't consider myself far right, but when it comes to spending, we're both parties are spending like drunken sailors and trying to put. And it goes back in the arguments between both. I don't. Neither party is serious about it. And President Trump is talking about all kinds of ways to improve the economy, but he's not talking about ways to tackle the budget and the national debt. And neither is Joe Biden or President Biden. So it's just, let's just cut through all the baloney and say, look, neither party's getting serious, and it's going to really hurt us. So this next article talks directly about this, and this is from Reuters. So BIS sends government debt warning before important elections. Who is BIS? Bank for International Settlements. So this is kind of on the international level. This is who handles a lot of the transactions between countries. So trading in currencies, etc. So dubbed the central banker's central bank. So this is kind of like the one of the top banks in the world, and just make sure the exchange is happening smoothly. And they're saying, well, the world economy is on a course for smooth landing. With interest rates shooting up, that's going to create a lot of issues. And one of his biggest concerns is global government debt is already at record levels. So you have the U.S. presidential vote, you have polls in Mexico, South Africa. France just had an election, lurching to the right. But again, they do 2 rounds of elections, so we'll have to see what happens with the second round of election. But again, debt in France is going up as well, and people are appealing to, or are being appealed to, right-leaning politicians that actually talk about being serious about the debt. You've got the new presidents in Brazil and Argentina really hacking and slashing the debt of their countries, or trying to get a handle on it. You have President Ruto in Kenya trying to do the same, but again, with varying success. But again, what his biggest thing is, persistent concerns over U.S. debt levels. French debt risk premium has surged, and he's not calling out any one or 2 governments, but the message is clear. And this is really the key, right here, the key quote. They, governments, must cut short the rise in public debt and accept that interest rates may not return to pre-pandemic ultra-low levels. They probably shouldn't, because those are artificial levels put in place and kept in place for years, Republican, Democratic administrations. Why? Because it made them look good in the short term, but created a bubble and problems long term that we are now dealing with. Thank you very much. Going back to Clinton, Bush, Obama, they all kept the rates at very, very low levels, which again, we're paying the piper now. So again, that's the gist of the article. Lowering the taxes or dealing with the public debt is a very serious thing. So here's an article from the left. This is not a site I'm familiar with, Common Dreams, but I do think it's important to talk about both sides of the issues and how to deal with the public debt. So a lot of countries are dealing with austerity measures. So increased taxes and decreased government spending. That's exactly what Argentina is doing. Trying to get a handle on their spending, government spending, and really adjust and address the large governments that have really spent more than anything else. This article doesn't try to claim that we need to cut down government spending. And that's the problem, is that if you don't, we get more and more money, but the government is still spending roughly 2 trillion more than we bring in. It doesn't matter how much we bring in. They always manage to spend more than ever. But this article, coming from a left perspective, is like, look, we need to tax the wealthy more, and we need a more just or equitable democracy to thrive and move forward with their vision of what the economy should look like. So, again, taxing wealth and profits of powerful corporations more aggressively can repair past economic harm, help the working class people, and bolster quality of life for all. So they get into a lot of the politics. A lot of these are racial justice, um, you know, going after the Supreme Court for apparently diluting black votes, um, and talking about the U.S. tax code will be on the table. So their whole argument here is that wealth is not distributed equally in the U.S. It's not in any other country. Doesn't matter what form of government they have. And they're claiming this is destabilizing our communities and causing all kinds of problems. This really is the key thing. Taxes, it turns out, are one of the best ways to curb excessive wealth and power. So you're curbing the wealth and power from a certain group and spreading that wealth and power through the government, who then picks winners and losers. So the holders of the purse strings in America controls more than just their ever fattening bank accounts, and they're claiming that the wealthy have way too much control over Congress, through fossil fuel companies, pharmaceuticals, etc. The ironic thing is they have those controls on both political parties. And to say that one party is sold out while the other isn't is just it's not factual. So, and what they want to do is spend more than ever on strong public institutions. So, to have that, they're claiming you need more and more taxes to pay more for schools, transportation, healthcare, and other basic need funding. The whole idea is to bolster public goods by taxing the wealthiest. So they really look at this as a pie. If we take away from the rich, we can help improve the situation for the average individual. Problem is, with government spending, it's not how it really works. So this is a little bit of a dated video, and I want to watch this. We're gonna have to come back to this right after the break because we are just have a few minutes. I never shared this. So sorry, I thought I did share this article. But this is one perspective, that we're going to tax our way out of this, that we're going to make people prosperous, the average person prosperous by taxing the rich. There are many arguments against this, and this really is a class warfare kind of mentality, where if we hurt one portion of society, it's obviously going to benefit the poor. The problem is, when you tax the rich and corporations, all they do is pass that cost on. That's one of the reasons with increasing taxes that we have more and more inflation, and again, that it's just going to pass the buck on to the average consumers, which hurts people more than anything else. Welcome back, everybody. And so we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to watch a little video about economic freedom. And so um, it's about 11 years old, so it's a little dated, but these principles still apply. So
Economic freedom is about, yes, the freedom to buy and sell stuff, but it's also about the freedom to interact with people, to converse with people, to travel where we want, to say the things we want to say. These things that involve interaction with others are truly at the core of economic freedom. There's a tremendous body of evidence that suggests that economic freedom is associated with many of the things we think of when we think of a healthy society. We can look at the Economic Freedom of North America Index. States with more economic freedom have higher growth rates of the economy, they have lower unemployment rates, they have less debt per GDP than states that are less free. All of these things we associate with economic health are also associated with economic freedom. But we see the same phenomenon when we compare countries of the world. The most economically free countries have GDPs per capita that are about 10 times the size of less economically free countries. One might argue that what we're seeing is the big country effect. That is, big countries will tend to be economically free, and they'll also tend to have high GDP per capita. But if we restrict our vision to just the poorest 20% of countries, the poor countries that have the most economic freedom have GDP per capitas that are 50% greater than the poor countries that have less economic freedom. One counter-argument is that GDP per capita only measures average income. It's possible that you could have a country with a small number of elite, rich people and a large number of destitute people. But if we examine inequality measures, what we find is that the countries that are more economically free also have more equitable income distributions. That is, economic freedom is not only associated with higher income levels on average, but it's also associated with a more equitable income distribution. Skeptics might argue that economic freedom achieves greater income because of exploitation of people and exploitation of the environment. Let's look at the data and see if this is the case. On average, women in economically free countries have more gender equality than women in economically less free countries. Also, child labor rates tend to be lower in economically free countries and higher in economically unfree countries. One might argue that child labor rates are lower in economically free countries because economically free countries are richer and therefore can import products from poor countries that do not have child labor laws. In effect, the rich countries encourage the poor countries to exploit their children, so the rich countries don't have to exploit theirs. But if we look at the poorest countries, we see the same phenomenon. Even amongst the poorest countries, those with more economic freedom have lower child labor rates than those with less economic freedom. Economic freedom also accompanies reduced exploitation of the environment. For example, deforestation is worst amongst the least economically free countries. Meanwhile, the most economically free countries actually experience reforestation. Their forests are growing. Economic freedom is about the freedom to act. The more freedom we have to act, the more able we are to do the things we want to do, to create wealth, to protect the environment, to help people be equal across genders, to help children no longer have to work in factories. It's about being free to make your own choices and to live with the consequences of those choices, provided that you do not violate anyone else's freedom. The more economic freedom we have, the more able we are to make the world a better place.
So currently, this is from 2013. Our current ranking has dropped even further to 24 globally. So I thought this is an interesting article, just kind of going through um, some of the reasons. And we're going to jump now to the Economic Freedom Index. I haven't talked about this before, and really just kind of talk about what really is driving these numbers here? So you get an overall score, and these are ranked highest to lowest based on overall score. So one of the things it mentions is that Singapore, Switzerland, Ireland, Taiwan have some of the highest scores. We are down here below the Czech Republic, the UAE, Chile, Latvia, Germany. So why are our numbers so low? There's some, and this is a mix, so it's not just some straight thing, but we actually do fairly well when it comes to property rights. We do have room for improvement, but overall for property rights, your property is protected in most situations um, compared to other countries. So there are companies that do score better than us. Finland, Norway, Denmark, have higher scores, but 95 is actually pretty good. Government integrity. This is something that, again, we're pretty far down the list, 76.4. And in the last couple of years, would you say that our government is more transparent? Or are we engaging in, doing things behind the back, going around Congress? Is government functioning the way it should? It's designed to function. Or are we figuring out ways around it? Through executive actions, going around Congress. And part of it is Congress is not functioning well. Because the executive can just do things and they can punt the ball and actually not vote on controversial things. And a lot of it is both parties, they're not willing to put their own jobs on the line. Another thing that has hurt the United States, judicial effectiveness. So when you look at going high to low, Ireland, Taiwan, Japan, Estonia, all kinds of countries, we're actually fairly low, 74.8 on judicial effectiveness. Part of this is the fact that we allow people to be sue happy. We don't, people can be taken to court for pretty much any reason. Throughout the world, to file a lawsuit against somebody, it's a loser pay system. So if you file a frivolous lawsuit and then you lose, you have to pay the legal fees of the other party. So it discourages frivolous lawsuits, but if you have a valid lawsuit and you can go to court and win, then you get a huge payday. So it discourages people from fighting when they don't have a winning case. And so people tend to settle a lot more quickly. If they have a losing case, they'll go through rather than using our judicial system as kind of another form of warfare. Now, tax burden. UAE, because they have so much oil money, and see a lot of these Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, very poor in other areas, very low in other areas. But as far as tax burden, they have a very low burden. But that's mainly because they're flush with oil, have oil pouring out of their ears. And so, whereas the United States on this, we're actually fairly low. I might have missed us. Kind of hard to think that we're that low on the list, but again, as far as tax burden, we pay pretty high taxes here in the United States, and so you have Vietnam, Kenya, a lot of poor areas. They have a lower tax burden because they can't afford anything else. Here we are, United States, all the way at 74.8, but we're pretty low on the scale there when it comes to tax burden. And what kills us even more? Government spending. So Haiti is a mess. So just because someone scores really high and government spending is low compared to the overall economy, judicial effectiveness is in the toilet property. Haiti is not someone to look at. But because their government spending is really low, they do well in that category. But overall, where's the United States? Again, I think we're very far down the list because government spending is one of our weak points. Or I believe here we are, 48.7%. So even though we're the biggest superpower in the world, government spending really does hurt us. And this is government overspending. So it's not just so much that we're spending, it's spending more, creating national debts. I mean, we could spend, if we could keep our spending within our revenues, we would still have the highest government budget. We probably still have the biggest military in the world. But instead of tamping things down, it's like we want more and more spending. We want more and more goodies, and we can't have it. We can't get it fast enough. And so this idea that we can just tax our way out of this, again, we have higher taxes now than ever, but yet we're just spending it all right away. So how does that affect us personally? When you have higher taxes, that means you keep less of your own money, and you have less money to go and purchase and do what you want. It means it's harder for people to go and actually thrive in this economy, to create their own business, to invest, and to save. So high taxes discourage all kinds of activity. And the thing is, when you tax the rich, they can just move their money. They can go elsewhere, and they do. I know plenty of people, even among people that are struggling economically, they're leaving the country on Social Security. A lot of them go down to Mexico, they go to the Philippines, they go elsewhere. Like, hey, I'm retired on a pension. I don't need to deal with the higher prices in the United States. I'm gone. And so we're losing people due to the high costs. We're losing people due to the high taxes, and they're just leaving the country altogether. And that's become a greater trend lately as things, costs and expenses continue to go up. So, freedom of action. And this goes to the local level when you can't start a new business, when you can't do what you need to on your home. People, when you can do what you want, people will buy, they will invest, they will do all kinds of things to invigorate and create their own paradise. Give what you will. I mean, my own home, I have a beautiful backyard, I love it. But the more economic freedom I have, the more I can improve it, I can enjoy it. But that's me going out in the market and using services, buying goods, etc., to improve my situation. So that's where this freedom of action really comes in. And a lot of you have too much government interference. People can't act, they can't go and create. And again, do what they love, which leads to, that's a huge source of entrepreneurship. We're running out of time, and we're going to continue to hammer home on this, but having property rights where your property can be respected. And so that is a huge issue, and the United States could absolutely improve on that. Part of that is crooked police. If you don't have, you're supposed to have body cams on, you're supposed to have other processes. I have a good guy who's religious, very conservative, but he doesn't trust the police as far as he can throw them. Why? Because he's a jeweler, and he's had some really bad experiences where he'd been pulled over by police for, they knew him, made up some reasons, and he frequently carried high-end jewelry on him because that's what he did. That was his profession. And he's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to the unscrupulous police and corruption. And so corruption hurts. And the Supreme Court actually came out and hammered local governments for just seizing assets and not returning them, even though there's no conviction. So again, that's a huge problem throughout our country, is where people can't enjoy their property rights. Their property can't be defended or protected in many areas. And a lot of this is through, we want to protect criminals, we want to protect human life, even though people endanger themselves and endanger the people in the process that they're robbing. So it's now, do we want government interference? Do we want balance? Absolutely. We want to protect the environment from bad actors. We want to protect people's rights. But too often, in that other article, when we're too concerned about making everything equal, whenever we pick winners and losers, there's always going to be inequality. There's always going to be those that have connections to the government. The more powerful we make the government, the worse those incentives get. Through bribes, through corruption, and also it imbalances and creates distortions throughout the economy. Market economy runs on freedom and the ability for individuals to go and invest, do what they want, and find their own freedom and choice. The opposite of that is where people are trying to force their vision, what they think would be better on the economy, and it takes away economic freedom and forces people on the boxes. This is what we want, so we're going to force this on people, and it hurts the economy, and it hurts individuals' quality of life. And so that's the overall purpose of this week, and purpose of economic freedom is to improve the quality of life through people making decisions of their own. And part of that is learning to face the consequences of our decisions. So this is, grandpa or old dad. I have adult kids now, but we're helping them learn the consequences of their own decisions. So we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.